Turn thrift store finds into spooky Halloween decor in minutes. Stick with me for 5 creative and budget-friendly flips that anyone can make. Perfect for that cozy night of crafting. All right, so the first flip, I'm going to be painting little cute ghosts on these little glass jars. I'm gonna start it off by cleaning it with a Lysol wipe. So just to get all the debris and dust and anything off of it, so then the paint really sticks nicely to the surface. And then while it's drying, I'm gonna talk about paint. Now in terms of the type of paint, I'm gonna go ahead and paint it in with chalk paint because it's much thicker and you'll need less coats to get coverage over glass. So basically it's gonna save me time by using the chalk paint. But if you don't have chalk paint on hand, don't worry, don't go out to buy it at the store. If you have acrylic paint on hand, then use that. The only thing with acrylic paint is that it might take a few extra layers to get full coverage. So I'm just gonna crack open my chalk paint, and then it's really nice and thick. I'm gonna show you the consistency. It's super thick, so it's gonna go on really nice and luscious. And then just paint it over top. Now, if you can't find jars like this at the thrift store, you can actually do this same technique on any type of glass jar. I've seen them with really tall, beautiful ones, or even mason jars work. So even going through your recycling bin and grabbing whatever glass jars you have there and doing the same technique would work really well. And also, while my paint is drying, I'm gonna go ahead and put my paintbrush in a Ziploc bag because I don't wanna put it in water because it's just it's gonna dilute the chalk paint a little bit too much. So I'm just gonna Ziploc it up so it doesn't dry out. One thing I forgot to mention is that you wanna place the painted jars down on a piece of wax paper or parchment paper because it won't stick to it while it dries. All right, now for the ghosty expressions, we're going to start. I have basically 3 different ones that I'm gonna show you just to give variety and different personality and characters to each of our ghosts. So the first one is gonna be our traditional ghost face. So with that, we're gonna do 2 oval eyes. So here I'm just using simple, basic acrylic black paint. And then we're just gonna repeat it on the other side. And then we're gonna do a big oval open mouth. And this is gonna give us that kind of spooky ghost look. And then we're going to paint in our second ghost face. And here too, you can paint in any expression. So if you're feeling anything in particular, go for it. Just have fun here. Go with your inner ghost. And now for our mouth, we're gonna make this ghost nice and smiley. A huge, big, happy smile. It's a happy ghost. Now for our third ghost, we're gonna make him spunky. He's gonna be a spunky one. So for this one, we're gonna paint one of the eyes huge, a really big black eye. And then the other eye is gonna be smaller. Okay, so that's that one. And then for the mouth, there we go. So the last step for these ghosts is, because it's on glass, I like to seal it with a top coat. So I'm using this one by Rust-Oleum Chalked, which is in a matte clear, but you can use any sealer you have on hand. So the second flip is I'm going to be transforming these really cute apothecary style jars that I found at the thrift store the other day into these cute little witches potions. All right, so for the first step, we're going to take off these price tags. All right, so the next thing is we're going to be cleaning off our bottles. So now what we're gonna do is, to make this craft even easier, I'm going to pre-print labels. So I just have my measuring tape here, and I'm just gonna get a rough estimate of how big these labels are gonna be. Okay, so now we're gonna head over to the computer and I'm gonna show you how to create these labels. So what I like to use is an app called Canva. So in Canva, you can actually use the rulers on the side and at the top to measure your labels, which is really helpful. And then the next step is I'm just gonna be adding a text box and then just adding in my witches potion names, which was one of the funnest parts of this project. And then when you're happy with your labels, you're gonna print it out on any printer. All right, now that my labels are all printed out, I'm gonna go ahead and cut them with my scissor. Once we have our labels all cut out, we're going to stick them to each jar with Mod Podge. Now I grabbed this small bottle of Mod Podge from my local dollar store for about $1. And then the next step is, I'm just gonna apply it at the back of the label, like that. And then I'm gonna stick it down. That's looking so cute already. Now that it's stuck down, to really seal it onto the glass to make sure it doesn't scratch or peel off, you want to apply a layer of Mod Podge right over that label. And I'm just gonna go over that label just a bit onto the glass, just to get a good seal. And then later on, it's going to be covered with black paint anyways, so it should be fine. And also this Mod Podge, it goes on white, but it dries clear. So it might look kind of like gunky and messy right now, but it's gonna dry super nice. Now I'm just gonna repeat the same step for the other 2 bottles. So once you're done applying your Mod Podge, you're gonna wait for this to completely dry before moving on to the next step. Now to speed up drying time, you can always use your trusty hair dryer. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're going to apply a really cool textured paint on top of our jars, kind of like the inspiration picture that I'm basing these jars off of, which was courtesy of ChatGPT. All right, so the next part might look like a little bit like a science experiment, but it's still art and it's gonna be fun. I've never actually made this type of paint before, so we're gonna be trying it out together for the first time. So what we'll need is some acrylic paint in black and some baking soda. So the recipe I saw online said add 3 parts paint to 1 part baking soda and a little bit of water if you need to thin it down a bit. Add about that much. And then I'm going to be taking some baking soda. So I think that's about right. And we can always add a little bit more paint if it gets too thick. So now I'm just gonna take my palette and I'm just going to mix it. So I can see that it's textured. It's looking a lot thicker compared to regular acrylic paint, which is good. We're going to take a jar. We'll start with the Mermaid Tears. And I also forgot to mention that I added the labels on both sides. That's another thing I did because I had extra labels. Okay, so now with the chalk paint that we've created, we're just gonna dab it onto our sponge and we're going to stipple it onto our jar, just like that. And it's gonna be a little bit difficult to see because we're doing black on black, but once it's dried, I'm hoping that it's going to be like a nice textured jar look. And I also want to mention that I'm dedicating this video to my husband because he's the one who suggested this idea. Okay, and this texture is really nice. I'm really enjoying it. And then I'm gonna repeat the same thing with the other 2 bottles. So I just want to quickly show you the difference between multiple coats and a single coat of this chalk paint. So on this one, I did a single coat and you can still see the texture that the stippling effect with the sponge and the baking soda gives. It's really beautiful. But on this one, I did 3 coats and you can see it's super chunky and really, really textured, much more textured than this one. So basically that just shows you what multiple layers looks like versus 1 layer. All right, now that we have our textured jars and they're nice and dry, we're going to take a few extra seconds here and we're gonna age these jars because right now they look kind of brand spanking new. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some gold acrylic paint. Now this is a paint I had on hand from Alpha 6, but you can use any gold acrylic paint you have. So I have a little bit of this gold paint on my finger, not too much. And then I'm just gonna add it here and there sparingly, kind of coming down on the side of the label a little bit too. And then I'm going to spread it out and we're gonna add some around the rim. And we don't wanna add too much because we don't wanna take away from that beautiful dark black bottle color. We just wanna add a little bit of aging to it. See already how it's just transforming? So I'm gonna work my way around the bottle and keep on adding this gold paint until I'm happy with it. The next step in these bottles is I wanted to add in a cork at the top of the bottle. And one of my fabulous neighbors, a part of the Buy Nothing group on Facebook, they gifted me a bunch of corks. So I was so grateful for that. Now, when I was trying to put in the cork into the bottle, I realized that the cork was a little bit too big for the bottle. So what I thought I'd do is shave it down with a knife. And just going to slice it down. It's kind of like slicing a really stale piece of bread. So that's one slice right there. And then I'm just going to continue that around the cork. Okay, so it's not perfect here, but it'll do. And moment of truth, drum roll. And it fits, yay. Now I'm going to do the same thing on my other two corks, and I'm going to show you the final results. All right, so the first step for the sign is we're going to paint over top of the entire sign. So for that, I'm gonna take my white chalk paint, but I want to darken it just a little bit to give it like an aged antique look. So I'll add just a little bit of brown or raw umber to the mix. All right, so I'm gonna start applying it in these up and down strokes. All right, so our layer of paint is nice and dry, and now we're just going to make some faux aging on the sides of this wooden sign. So all I'm gonna do is take that brown paint I used in the first step, and then I'm just gonna run my finger along the edges and not be too careful, just kind of be playful with it here. So now our sign is looking nice and aged. We're gonna leave that dry, and then we'll come back to the next step. Now for the next step is we're gonna add our words onto our sign. So what I decided to do is print out a template on Canva, and then I just stuck a piece of carbon paper at the back, and I'm just gonna transfer that over for the title of my sign. So I'm just gonna take a pen or pencil and just trace. So I'm done tracing, I'm gonna lift it up, and then you get a beautiful stencil, which makes it so much easier to paint in. So talking about painting it in, so I'm going to be using my Posca paint marker here in black to fill in the entire design. But if you don't have a paint marker, you can just use thinned down black paint with your smallest detailing brush. All right, so now we're gonna have a little fun, and we're gonna add in our recipe for our witch's brew. So this morning I was having a really awesome conversation with my friend, and I asked her what she would put in a witch's brew, and she gave me so many fabulous answers. So what I did was I put them all in this jar, and what I'm gonna do with you right now is we're going to pick out 5 of them randomly, and we're gonna add them to our witch's brew. So the first one is going to be, magic powder. Last one is, I can't even read my writing, that's crow feathers. Awesome. So I added some instructions at the bottom using my carbon paper and a template, and now I'm just gonna fill it in. So I found this super cute house tea light holder the other day at my local thrift store, and it was only $3.99, which was a steal. But this is not so Halloweeny yet. So in today's video, I'm gonna walk you through how to turn this into a spooky mini haunted house. So I have my brush here, and I'm just gonna paint right over top. So this is really gonna be a dramatic transformation here. All right, now that this house is painted all black, we're gonna add some details to this haunted house. So the first detail we're gonna add is a door. So this door, I just made this out of these giant popsicle sticks I got from the dollar store, and I just painted it with brown paint and with some black paint around these details. So I'm just gonna use a glue gun, and I'm gonna try to center it. The next detail we're gonna add is the number of this home. And this is also made out of a little piece of a popsicle stick. So for the roof, I've made a whole bunch of these popsicle stick shingles. So basically it's just a popsicle stick that I've painted with some brown paint. And I'm gonna stick this onto the roof with a glue gun. So I'm basically going to repeat adding all these popsicle sticks along the top roof over here, and then I'm gonna show you what it looks like. All right, our roof is complete, and it's looking really nice and vintage and old, which I'm loving. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're going to add some shutters on some of these windows. So for the shutters, I just created them out of popsicle sticks again and then just drew on these black lines. So to glue them on, I'm going to add glue at the one side, one edge of that popsicle stick. And then I'm going to put it into place. And I'm going to hold it at like a 45-degree angle while the glue has a chance to dry. That way it gives it more of like a 3D open look. So it's not completely flat and it looks like the shutters kind of open a bit, like that. And then I'm just going to repeat that on the other side of the window. So it's looking pretty spooky so far. So now on the other windows, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a little fun here and we're going to bar up our windows with some of these like planks of wood. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add 2 of these shutters up here just to give it the illusion that there's another window or attic window at the top. Go. And then I'm gonna add some details at the bottom over here. So the first one is I made this tiny little sign with the words on it, enter at your own risk, with a little toothpick for the stick. So I'm going to stick that on. What haunted house isn't complete without a pumpkin, right? So these pumpkins I just painted out of these wooden beads, and then I just painted on a jack-o'-lantern face with a black paint marker. So I'm just gonna glue that on this side over here. Okay, the next thing I'm gonna add are these tiny little acrylic bats that I got from the dollar store today. So I'm just gonna use a glue gun and then just stick them on. Just trying to figure out where I wanna put them. So I think I'll place one right at the top of the roof, just kind of perched up right in the center. All right, so I'm just gonna add some final details here. So I wanted to add a spider web. So I'm just grabbing a white Posca marker here, and I'm just gonna zoom in so you can see it. So the next flip is I found this beautiful candle holder at Value Village the other day for $2.99. And I've also been seeing this really cool skull display holder on the net. So I got inspired by that. So I'm going to be using this candlestick. So first, let's head on over to the garage and I'm gonna grab my husband's saw and we're gonna cut this down to a different size. All right, now the candlestick is cut in half perfectly. Now I'm gonna head downstairs to our 3D printer to print out our skull. All right, so my glue gun is all heated up and I'm just gonna apply a whole bunch base, and then I'm going to take my skull, glue it in place. I'm going to hold it here for a few seconds. So the glue gun didn't work really well. It was really wobbly and not stable. So I'm going to be using super glue instead to get a really strong bond. All right, now that our skull is attached to the bottom of the stand, I'm gonna go ahead and paint it in with some glow-in-the-dark paint and a secret design. So I'm gonna go do that, and then I'm gonna turn the lights off and you're gonna see that design come to life. Thanks so much for joining me for this Halloween thrift flip marathon. It was so much fun. Wishing you a happy Halloween with lots of peace, love, and beautiful color.